recording on now. As you can hear from the very loud voice from Zoom, this meeting is now being recorded. So for today, the agenda that was expected was, we were expecting a presentation around cloud native CNFs for, containerized network functions. But Arun Kumar, which was supposed, and Saidulu, which were supposed to give this presentation, are, at least for the time for now, are not in the call. And Janjun, I believe you were in contact with them. Do you think they are going to attend today's meeting?
Actually, I'm not sure. I pinged Arun on GitHub, but he didn't reply. So maybe they will skip this one.
Perfect. So let's say that we can probably keep waiting for them, but in the meanwhile, we need to go ahead with our meeting. We don't have any other topic, official topic in the agenda for today. And so what do we have is a request from Marcus, which is instead is on the call to provide an update on their current status, of which I have to be honest, I don't know exactly what that refers to, but if there is no other pressing issue pertaining the next Antrea release or any other feature under development or being currently designed, perhaps we can let Marcus introduce what he would like to talk about. So I don't know, is there any relatively urgent request to discuss about any other topic? Because I did not receive any request to put any topic in the agenda for today. Waiting as usual, 10 seconds.
I don't have any specific one, but I'm not sure, Kobe, and you want to talk about IPAM a little or not?
Honestly, we could
go ahead.
talk about IPAM, but then you was assuming that we would have to reopen this issue again once we have the discussion with regarding the network function subject, which also is going to require some IPAM, as far as I gathered from our email thread. So if you think that there is value to discuss IPAM today, then we can do it.
What you say is true, Kobe. The thing is that the fact that the CNF proposal also includes, let's say, a subtopic around IPAM does not necessarily mean that we should not discuss IPAM until we hear this proposal. So I'm considering probably, Kobe, that if that's okay for you, you can introduce the progress that you've made. I mean, not the progress in terms of coding, of course, that the progress in terms of design ideas that you made so far, and then maybe that should not take long, and then maybe we can let Marcus introduce his topic. Does that work for you?
Yeah.
Okay, so please go ahead.
Let me just have 2 seconds to find the latest, most recent email in the subject. So we'll have some basis for discussion. Okay, so the initial reason which the whole discussion around IPAM began is that at EKS, IKS, we cannot rely on kube control to run node IPAM service, so controllers. So we would have to find some other mean for supplying IPs to the nodes. As of today, each node is getting a CIDR when it initializes from node IPAM, and from there on, it uses host local to allocate IPs from this IP block. that thing, well, the whole design of Antrea as of now relies on the fact that each node has its own CIDR block. So initially, my intention was to resolve the dependency on node IPAM running within the controller, and I ported the node IPAM code to run within the Antrea controller, so we can run independently within EKS, etc. However, we had several requests for an upgraded IPAM mechanism in Antrea. One of them was to use smaller blocks and reallocate more IP blocks to a node whenever it needs them. The other one was to do something more something different, such as allocating a CIDR to a namespace. Other CNIs have that functionality, such as Calico. They have their own IPAM, which is quite capable. Yet, building such mechanism would affect the whole Antrea design. We won't be able to allocate a gateway on the node itself, as a CIDR doesn't belong to a node. It could be like spread around several nodes, and we kind of have to consider how to handle this. I came up with two different proposals. We kind of decided to focus on allocation of smaller CIDRs to the node, meaning initially we allocate a small block of like less than /24, which we allocate today by default, and then once the node is running out of CIDRs, we would allocate more IPs to that node. Any questions so far? Three, two, one. Okay, I'll go ahead. So Salvatore and I spent some time considering this, several ways to implement this. We decided to leave aside for now the per namespace CIDR allocation, and focus on something which would be possible to implement, like in the next release, or maybe like 2 releases from now, as a timeline. So obviously, unlike now, where the controller, either the kube controller or the Antrea controller, allocates a CIDR for a node whenever it initializes, now it will have to happen like multiple times in the lifetime of the node. So the CIDR would have to allocated to the controller, to the Antrea controller, as it does today. We would have to do some work on the agent code to be able to cope with multiple CIDRs. The only effect that we concluded so far was that for each new CIDR which would be allocated, we would have to configure another gateway IP on the gateway port, or the gateway interface on Open vSwitch, meaning if we had CIDR X and we had CIDR Y, we have to add another gateway IP. We would be better if we allocate more CIDRs before the IP pool exhausts, meaning if we have like the node consuming more IPs once its IP pool is empty, we might be in a situation where it is unable to spin up new pods due to a connectivity issue or anything like this. Plus, it would cause some latency. As for the whole design itself, we considered two different options. One of them is that the controller has a big block of IPs, as pretty much as it has today. It would divide it to subsiders as also as it does today. Like today, it takes for example, /16 and divides it into /24s, which just spreads around the nodes. So it would divide it into smaller siders and would expose them as via custom CIDR. Each agent would which requires IPs would mark one of those CIDRs as its own. It's owned by it. Obviously, would have to have some concurrency handling mechanism here. So if two different nodes consume the same CIDR, one of them should fail and retry to take something else. When an agent concludes that a CIDR is not required anymore, it doesn't have any other nodes, any other pods which have IPs from that CIDR, and it has some spare IPs on a different CIDR, then it would be the agent's responsibility to release this CIDR back to the controller. Where are the difficulties in this proposal? When the node goes down, as the node pretty much manages the IP consumption, when a node goes down, the controller is unaware of what IPs it's holding. I mean, it could like query it, but it has to be managed by the agent, like a node failure. And the agent should decide when to this node is not going back and release those IPs. Some other solutions just hand that responsibility to the user and give some CLI to reclaim IPs, which like been occupied by zombies. The agent should know like its IP status. Today, it's solely being managed by host local IPAM plugin, which has its block of it's like state management, and the agent is unaware of the IP status, the IP address pool status. So the agent should have visibility to this. And I think that that I covered everything. Any questions so far?
Yeah. So I have a question regarding to the layer 3 forwarding part. So if for sublets per node, do you plan to create multiple? Let me think about. Do you want to create multiple gateway ports on the bridge, or just one port with multiple IP address? How it will be?
I don't see any reason to create multiple ports. I think that assigning multiple IPs to a single port is good enough, right?
I see. Okay.
I mean, thanks, Kobe, for your introduction. I think that there are three follow-up to what you just discussed. One is regarding the design ideas themselves about how to allocate additional subnets to nodes upon request, how to collect them, how to how to manage the IP space for the nodes. The second is about what Jianjun was just asking, the impact on layer 3 forwarding, and not only layer 3 forwarding, whether there could be impact also on other Antrea functionalities. Together, for instance, we assess the network policies, and we have reason to believe that there should be no impact on network policies. But there are a whole set of other features on which we are yet unsure whether there will be more work to do. One idea would be, for instance, for Antrea proxy, at first glance, we don't expect this will have an impact on Antrea proxy. It should work with one subnet per node as well as with many subnets per node. But community feedback will be more than welcome around this. In order to solicit community feedback, I believe the best next step should be to put pretty much the same design ideas that you have expressed here on GitHub, so that everybody can comment on those. And the third aspect, or the third area of discussion around this proposal is around the requirements. As you said, you together with me, that was probably my idea to make things a little bit simpler, was to stick to the idea of the subnet per node IPAM. Which I believe fits nicely Antrea and the Antrea network model. And it is something that any idea of flexible IPAM, as long as we keep the subnet per node allocation idea, is going to be relatively easy to implement. In my opinion, at the moment, a subnet per namespace approach, it's something that will require more profound changes in the Antrea architecture. The underlying question is whether we have a strong use case for implementing an IPAM per namespace. My little experience with cloud native networking tells me that IP allocation is a sort of how can I say, secondary problem. It's more important. Service discovery, for instance, is way more important. So in my opinion, I don't think that having each namespace with a distinct IP allocation range as is something which is a very important requirement. But we know that opinions are different, very different on this topic. So I would like to hear your feedback as well.
And yeah, I definitely feel there will be a more implication for the layer 3 forwarding part. For example, today in some CI commands, when you provide you don't specify any source IP, we assume the IP will be the gateway 0 IP. For instance, you have multiple IPs on gateway 0, then probably just think about what will be that default IP now. Just to be one example here. I think another change probably we need to consider is for the forwarding to the local port part. Because today only for the traffic to the remote node, we assume it goes through routing, and we, for example, decrement the TTL for the packet. And for the local port, it's always layer 2 forwarding only. For since you have multiple sublets per node, and even for layer 2, actually it's routing. And maybe we also need to at least decrement the TTL, and then I'm thinking about it.
Makes sense.
Yeah, actually, the TTL management is something which is missing in my I should note that.
Yeah, I just some my initial ideas. Probably since I didn't spend much time, I don't think it will be a complete list of changes.
Yeah, but if we kind of go towards a design where like we allocate an IP pool which is not related to a node, like per namespace or per anything, then we kind of have much larger challenges, as we don't have like a gateway port which is local to the node, unless we kind of allocate an IP per each node, which would be a gateway out of the cider block. But I don't know if you want to do that.
No, I don't think that is quite feasible if you do for per namespace. Yeah, I agree.
On the other hand, we don't like want to route one node by another node. It doesn't make much sense either. So we kind of have to come up with something creative. I don't know.
Right. I think if we do this flexible IPAM, probably we should first consider we still want to do layer 2 forwarding, or we just do layer 3. Like you just do some size 32 routes for every port, no matter it's a local or remote.
I mean, I think in general, I know OpenShift used to do some kind of I think they used to do a CIDR for namespaces, but it seems to me like that's really hard. Like, and I agree, like, I'm not sure why people want to do it. Like, that may have been something they carried along from the OpenShift 2 dot whatever days.
Yeah, I think it probably makes more sense when you do routable ports. When your IP are visible to the underlying network and even to the external network. And then
namespace CIDRs, you mean?
Right. That means some service in the underlying network, or maybe some physical appliances, they can apply the policy or service based on the source of the traffic. For example, I can say for a given namespace, I want to apply what loud-start firewall rules or some QoS policies, something like that.
Oh, okay, so that's okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely think with routable pods, it's a very valid use case that we see a lot with NCP as well. The use of per namespace when it's routable, especially in hybrid environments where we do have legacy applications, I think it's a very big use case there. But the amount of use cases for routable pods are also limited, meaning that the separation of the CIDRs is definitely more important for smaller CIDRs. But I do think the namespace is I have multiple environments where that is a valid use case today, and they're all in routable environments. I don't see that as a valid use case, or I don't see the reasons for it in a non-routable pod environment necessarily, though.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. My question, let's assume that we implement routable pods with per namespace CIDRs. Then I was considering how Antrea east-west traffic should change in that way if we do that. So should we have a sort of distributed router approach in Antrea where you don't really have local gateways at all? Or for instance, should every namespace have a designated gateway node, maybe an active and a backup node for providing redundancy? And therefore we need to provide traffic steering to make sure that every node will always that every namespace will always have a predefined node as a gateway.
I would do distributed routing if you ask me. I mean, it's kind of optimal from forwarding path perspective.
Yes, that will make sense. That will make sense. I think that I was considering, for instance, other solutions that provide container networking based on Open vSwitch and like OVN, for instance. And at the moment, they don't support namespace presider. They stick with the idea of subnet per node. As for OpenShift that Jay was mentioning, I am fairly sure, like 90% sure, so just 19, that the idea of supporting CIDR per namespace has been dropped in OpenShift SDN for OpenShift 4. So at the moment, it's even there is just a subnet per nodes. But I think that as a follow-up from this meeting, it will be interesting, apart from the, let's say, forwarding problem, just for the IPAM problem, it will be interesting to find a solution that a way to generalize Hobby's proposal to see if we can make it work also on for CIDR per namespaces. Otherwise, the alternative will be, in my opinion, from an architectural perspective, to have an Antrea, let's say an Antrea IPAM controller, which is potentially separate from the Antrea controller and only serves IPAM, where you can have a controller whose strategy is distributing subnet for node to nodes, and another controller whose strategy is distributing subnet per namespaces. In the likely case that we will not find a design that can accommodate both scenarios. Kobe, what do you think of this? Is that something that makes sense to you?
One of the names which were dropped on that email thread regarding IPAM was Whereabouts IPAM, which distributes IPs from like a big sided block to everywhere, as far as I gathered from my brief look at it. And it's kind of like the same case. So if Whereabouts IPAM is relevant, then yeah, then we kind of have to find some general solution for traffic management, for forwarding when IPAM doesn't associate an IP block with a node.
Perfect. Okay. Is there any other comment or questions on the IPAM requirements and design? Waiting, as usual, 30 seconds. All right, Kobe, do you think that we have enough on this to publish the proposal on GitHub?
Yeah, I believe so. We at least have a basis for a wider discussion, maybe.
Perfect. So we should definitely do that, in my opinion.
All right.
And perfect. I think this concludes the discussion on IPAM for today. So next topic on the agenda will be Marcus introducing his or their work. Marcus, are you still online, still with us?
Yeah, hello. I hope you guys can hear me.
Yes, loud and clear.
Yep.
Oh, that's great, yeah. Yeah, thanks for the invitation. I'm Marcus from the company Glasnostic. So the status is that we have a working containerized networking function that's just working with a raw socket. We set that up with Antrea 011 on the Kubernetes 118 cluster. So what we're basically doing is we're sending via OpenFlow basically all the traffic between pods to another pod that is controlling the traffic. for two reasons: either like allow the traffic, like a network policy, or to slow down the traffic to rate limiting. And now, as we're running with raw socket, so the problem that we're obviously having is the performance. So we're very interested in the DBDK support. And the other problem that we're having is because the customer we want to run this is using Kubernetes 1.15. And as far as I can see, Antrea is now supporting only 1.16. So I'm not sure what's the best approach to deal with these two problems. So that's why I basically joined and want to discuss it with you guys.
Thanks, Marcus. So I was hearing you, and I have one question. You say that in your solution you have a pod that acts to like as a traffic controller to provide the traffic shaping and other services.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
And that will be your CNF pod, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the interesting thing. It's basically intercepting the whole traffic.
Perfect.
Between all pods. Yeah.
Perfect. So I'm probably not in the best position to comment on your request about Kubernetes 1.15, but let's say that what is supported by Antrea, it's what is the support matrix that is actively tested in the Antrea CI environment. As you perfectly know, there is no reason why Antrea should not support Kubernetes 1.15. It's just that Antrea declares as supported what is actually tested within the CI pipeline. Now, whatever packaging that is made for Antrea, that, in my opinion, depends on the packager whether they want extend or restrict the support metrics. So let's say, for instance, company Foo decide to make a commercial product based on Antrea. If they, in their environment, they have, if their environment, they have the ability of testing Antrea with Kubernetes 1.15, then they should be able to declare support for Antrea 1.15 for Kubernetes 1.15. I think that your question, however, is and which deserves discussion here, is that let's assume that you find a bug in Antrea which is specific to Kubernetes 1.15 integration. Will you get an upstream fix? Will you be able to propose an upstream fix? Or will you be told, sorry, we don't fix it because we don't support Kubernetes 1.15? In my opinion, any fix, as long as it does not break support for extending release, as long as it comes with proper testing, it can be accepted. But I would also like hear the opinion here from the other maintainers on the call.
Yeah, I would agree with what you said, Saudri.
Yeah, I agree. And I think currently even Antrea 0.11 can support Kubernetes 1.15. It's just some YAML file need to be updated because we are using some resources, some API that are introduced after Kubernetes 1.16. Yeah.
Yeah, Jen, I think that was actually the problem. With some update, you updated the YAML resources. So what would be the strategy then? Let's say like we install it with 1.15 and we send you guys as a fix those 1.15 compliant resource files. Would that be enough? Then we would have like two set of resource files to be supported, like one for 1.15 and one for 1.16 plus.
I think it's possible. Maybe we could add we could publish a legacy YAML file for older Kubernetes versions, but maybe we cannot guarantee that we cannot always test all the old versions in our CI because there are too many versions. But if there is any issue found, we definitely can make a fix as long as it doesn't break the latest Kubernetes version.
Okay, that sounds kind of easy. Then I guess the bigger problem is the DPDK.
Yes, I mean, personally, I think DPDK support will be welcome into Antrea. The follow-up question from me is this something that you're already working on? You're planning to work on?
The thing is, we are just finished that the CNF is working with raw sockets. So what we tested is we tested Malthus because we need that for DPDK. So we also made that running with a new version with Antrea that didn't run with 1.15. That's why I'm asking. So that's the current status, but we didn't continue with the DPDK support yet. But we are very happy to help with that. So if you point us there in the right direction, that will be the next thing we will be working on.
Yes, and I don't know what is the feedback here, especially from Jianjun, but in my opinion, the next step will be to sync up with the other team that was supposed to present today about CNFs with Antrea, because I do believe they also have a proposal around DPDK, but since Jianjun knows more about that, maybe he can provide a better feedback.
Yes, I think Aaron do have a proposal to, I think they call the multiple network support. Basically, they propose to use some CRD. We are still discussing whether we use Malthus spec or some other CRD to define network. And then you can put annotation on a port and to say I want a second interface on a specific network. It's very similar to Malthus
Yes.
way of defining a secondary interface and separate networks. And in that way, I think we also talk about we want to support OSDBDK network. But I'm not sure that match your requirements exactly, or actually you're thinking about something different. If you can provide more information on the requirements, probably can be helpful. And of course, we can discuss together with Aaron and other guys to see if we can have a single proposal also support your requirements.
Okay, that sounds good. So you will be then the contact, Jianjun?
Sure. Could we probably we can start some designing on this issue, right? GitHub issue. So Aaron and other guys, other Intel guys can also comment on that.
Yes, and also since all the interested parties are on the Slack channel, perhaps the conversation can go ahead there. I noticed, Marcus, that you're there. The people working on this proposal are also on that Slack channel. Perhaps we can move the conversation there to make sure that all your requirements are either already covered by the proposal that's being prepared, or whether we might want to extend that proposal to make sure that your requirements are covered too.
Right. I think these Intel guys actually around, they did respond fast earlier. I guess probably just this week they doing, probably they just take a PTO or whatever for Thanksgiving, I guess. That's why they didn't respond so far.
That's true.
Okay, sorry, I just didn't get that 100%. So the discussion will be done on the Slack channel, on the Antrea Slack channel, about that feature.
So let's say that we have an open. We have two places where we can continue the discussion. Let's say that I would say that for topics strictly related to design and requirements, I will use GitHub because there's already a proposal being discussed on GitHub for this. For let's say for more human interaction, I will consider using Slack. Meaning that, you know, if you have questions on the design, maybe it's better to ask them on GitHub or to point them out on GitHub. If you need to ping somebody and get information from some other community member, Slack is definitely a better option than email.
Yeah, that's for sure.
All right. And is there anything else to add on this topic?
Yeah, and Marx, I think I would suggest you to at least put some description of your requirements or any ideas you have about the implementation and the GitHub issue. So at least we can start.
It's the same issue that I contacted you. So the
Yep.
same issue. Yeah. Okay.
Well, if you want, you can create a sub issue and put a link to the to that parent one.
Mm-hmm.
Up to you.
Oh, okay. Sounds good.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, perfect. So since we have already still 14 minutes in the meeting, is there, I mean, we can open the floor, let's say, for open discussion. So if you have any topic that you would like to bring up, feel free to propose.
I had a Windows kube proxy question, and I see my friend Rui is here, so he may be able to answer it. I think I've asked this before and someone answered it, but I figured I'd just live ask it because I always have trouble wrapping my head around it. So Antrea's kube proxy, in Windows, currently when I run it, what I'm wondering is there, it doesn't, at a high level, it doesn't support certain types of node traffic. So for that, we fall back to the user space kube proxy. So does that mean that if that's the case, feel free to interrupt me if I'm going the wrong way here, but if that's the case, does that mean we have like some kind of redundant kube proxy rules, like we have some OVS rules that are programmed that are also existing in the user space kube proxy? Or does that mean that we just don't program those rules in OVS and we only program them in the user space kube proxy? And then what about the other routing rules, right? Because if you're running the user space kube proxy, presumably isn't it writing rules for all service to pod traffic? So does that mean we have redundant rules there? I mean, I don't even know if the redundant rules is bad or anything. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just curious whether that's something we should expect.
Yeah, maybe
Okay,
Ray
Jane.
want to. Yeah, go ahead, Ray, please. Go ahead.
Okay, Jane, let me repeat your question. So you are asking if there are redundant rules in Antrea proxy and kube proxy, right?
Yeah, the user space kube proxy, yeah.
Yes. So if you enable the kube proxy, there will be some redundant rules. It's because we still depend on the user space kube proxy when start up. So so if you disable the Antrea proxy, there will be no redundant rules.
Okay. If you disable Antrea proxy on Windows, what's the? I mean, so I guess the question behind the question is, I'm just trying to think in terms of production Windows deployments, like what's the right thing to do, right? So selfishly, I like all I'm really thinking is like, well, okay, so we're, of course, on our end in the cluster API side, we're going to be supporting Antrea on Windows, and I just want to have I want to be able to tell a networking story that's as simple as possible, that makes sense. And so, should I be using kube proxy? Or should I be using Antrea proxy? And just because, I mean, it's one less.
So Jay, I think for now you need to use both kube proxy and Antrea proxy.
Okay, and there's no known issue with the fact that we have multiple rules in the same place. Like we don't expect.
It's like you can say it's multiple rules. I am not sure we should say duplicate rules, but you are right. Both Cookie proxy and the Antrea proxy will try to implement all the implement load balancing for all the service traffic.
Yeah.
We don't really say since Cookie proxy already handle the load port, for example. And we skip some rules. Sorry, probably it's another way. It's like even Antrea. Go ahead.
Yeah, how does precedent? Yeah, go finish what you're saying. But I guess while you're at it, how is the precedent handled at the OVS level? Just curious.
It doesn't really conflict because for the traffic from the port, it will never be intercepted by Cookie proxy because the traffic never leaves the open switch.
Yeah.
Will not be intercepted by the Cookie proxy in the user space. And for the traffic, the load port traffic specifically, since it enters the node from the node default namespace in quote namespace. Finally, it will enter the host TCP stack and it will be intercepted by Cookie proxy, right? Before it enters the open switch, it will already being deleted to the endpoint IP. So OpenWhisk will not delete again.
Okay. So no traffic
So that's the kind of situation, right? For the longer term, I think we try to implement load port with Antrea proxy too, and then when that is done, you can store Cookie proxy at least on the Windows node.
Okay, cool. So then my next follow-up I wanted to ask was, this is more of an idea that I was just wondering whether it fits in or not. I mean, in SIG Windows, some of you all may have heard of CSI proxy, which is it's like WINS, right? Except that what they do is they have specific calls, specific API calls that are gRPC that have gRPC wrappers. So what that means is that only very specific Windows functions can be called, right? So what I was wondering was in Antrea, we currently in Antrea, we start up the kuprox when we start it up in user space. There is no other need for us. If we're not running the kuproxy in user space, then we would, do we have any other requirements on WINS, on Rancher WINS? Like, do we need it?
So Jay, do you mean if the Antrea need more functions or requirements for the Rancher WINS? Jay?
Sorry, what was that? What was that?
I'm repeating your question. So do you mean so if you're asking if the Antrea need more functions or requirements for Rancher WINS, right?
For using WINS, yeah.
Yeah. We indeed have some more requirements because you need you know that the current implementation of the Rancher WINS have many limits. For example, we just can run the binary from host, but we cannot run a script from the host. Yes, but currently I think the Rancher WINS can meet our requirement because we just need to run the Antrea agent or the core proxy binary.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, no, that I think that's fine. I just I was trying to see whether at some point, since, and this is more of an idea than anything else, since there's precedent in SIG Windows for CSI proxy, which is something that does what WINS does, but does not completely open up a socket where you can just do anything you want, like Rancher does. When we start going into more production deployments, there's, people may start asking questions about, well, do we really want to run Rancher wins? And in that situation, I was just wondering around whether maybe a CNI proxy, you know what I mean? Something that constrained the amount of calls, API calls that you could make, that basically copied what Rancher Wins did, but only worked specifically for the stuff that Antrea wants to do and nothing else. You know what I mean? So in other words, literally copy paste the socket stuff that we're doing and literally have that thing launch Antrea agent and nothing else. You know what I mean? Via gRPC. That would kind of reduce the security. What's the buzzword that they always say? The blast radius, or the surface area, right? It would reduce our surface area because Rancher Wins is a pretty big security hole as is. And the way they've dealt with that again in Sig Windows is by creating CSI proxy, which is a constrained version of what Rancher Wins does. So I was just kind of wondering whether maybe having a CNI proxy type thing might be an analog that we might want to consider, but no strong opinions, but I just wanted to see if there was anyone who thought about that.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting idea, but you are saying something generic to any CNI or just for Antrea?
I mean, I guess it really would be specific to Antrea, but I mean, there may be some way that you might be able to think of something being generic.
I see.
Like maybe if you assumed that every CNI had an agent that it needed to run on every node as an agent process, maybe you could make it generic in that sense, right? So there may be something you could do there to make it, but I mean, at that point, it wouldn't really be a CNI proxy. It would be more like a, like in the CSI proxy, the idea is there's just generic commands that every CSI needs to run that are PowerShell commands, but every CSI doesn't necessarily need to run arbitrary Windows commands, right? And so I think it's a similar thing for CNIs. There's probably a small space of PowerShell commands you might want to run, and they're probably NetSH commands, but then there's the agent restarting stuff that,
Okay. Yeah, I think I got your idea. I'm not very familiar with this proxy implementation. Maybe Ray and Winnie knows more than me. How about let's do some offline discussion on this one? It's definitely something I'm interested in to learn more, actually.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. What's the timeline for how long we should keep the Windows kube proxy in user space? Are we gonna have that for? Are we gonna require that for another year or another 6 months?
No,
or
definitely no. I think we're really working on node port support for
Mhm.
by Antrea proxy.
Okay.
I think we already have a pull request. Wiki, do you guys know when we plan to enable node port with Antrea proxy, then we can remove the kube proxy on Windows?
Yeah. Yes, we have a plan. Want to totally replace kube proxy with Antrea proxy. I think maybe the roadmap is but 2 release. I mean, maybe 13 or 14. Antrea 0.13 or 14. We want to totally remove kube proxy.
Okay. And y'all come out with a new release every like 1 week or 2 weeks. So I'm just
yeah,
6 weeks.
Yeah, kube proxy, it also supports some other functions. So actually, if we want to totally replace it, we have to move all of the functions from kube proxy to Antrea proxy. So it is not so easy.
Yeah, no. I was just joking. Yeah, so we're looking at 2 releases. So that's probably what, like 4 months maybe, that's great. I mean, that's going to be longer.
Yeah, I think should be three months.
Okay, cool. All right, so 3 more months. All right, great. So that's you'll probably solve this problem before we really,
Yeah.
That's great. That's enough. That's enough, I think, for me. Oh, one other question. CI, do we test Windows and CI right now? And if not, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, we have CI. We have Windows CI pipeline to run the Windows test cases for each per request.
Okay, cool. All right. I recently ran the SIG Windows tests and the conformance tests, and I ran them on a Windows cluster, and only 5 of them passed, but I have possibly some other things wrong with it.
If you have questions, you can contact Weiying or Ray for help.
Okay, cool, awesome.
All right, thanks, Jay. So we are slightly over time. I have one 30-second announcement to make. Some community members are asking us to reconsider meeting times to make them more friendly to attendees in the United States, especially those in central and eastern area of the United States. As a matter of fact, we have kept this schedule now for over 6 months, and as you know, we are probably it's more friendly to let's say Asian, maybe European countries. So since there is no way that we can have a single meeting time that will make everyone happy, we are considering again a proposal for alternated meeting slots. We don't have to make a call now, of course. According to the last survey that we did about 6 months ago, there was a split between the slot that we have now was likely preferred because most community members prefer to not have a rotating schedule, mostly because every week you have to wonder, is this the AM one or the PM one? So that's why most people prefer a single time. But anyway, since several community members are not able to join the meeting, we will now reconsider it, probably reopen the poll, and the discussion will happen on Slack. So if you are interested in providing your feedback, please let us know. Say that, I think that is all for today. We are unfortunately already 3 minutes over time, and I would like to apologize with that for that. Is there any final question, comment? Waiting 15 seconds.
I have one. I'll put it on Slack so we can all go back to sleep.
All right, perfect. Okay, thanks, Jay. And so that is all for today. I will stop the recording now.